Hello, everyone. You are listening to She Leads with Carly, and in this show, we talk to the absolute best, brightest, and yes, badass leaders. I'm your host, Carly Malatsky. Hello, everyone. I am super excited to welcome our guest today, Inbal Shani. Inbal is the Chief Product Officer at Twilio, the customer engagement platform that powers the texts, calls, and authentication messages you receive from companies every day. If you've ever gotten a ride receipt from Uber, a verification code from your bank, or an appointment reminder, there's a very good chance that Twilio was behind it, as today, the company is valued at nearly $17 billion. Inbal's career spans some of the most influential technology companies in the world. She spent years at Amazon and Microsoft, rising to general manager roles at both organizations, including at Amazon Web Services. She later stepped into her first Chief Product Officer role at GitHub before joining Twilio as CPO and head of R&D. Originally from Israel, Inbal earned her bachelor's degree in aerospace engineering from Technion, Israel Institute of Technology, one of the country's top engineering institutions, and later completed her master's degree in mechanical engineering at Tel Aviv University. Inbal, it is such a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much, Carly. It's so exciting to be here.
Of course. So, Inbal, what I love to do, and what most of my listeners know already by now, is I actually want to go back to when you were 5-10 years old. So as I said, you grew up in Israel. What type of kid were you? I'm guessing you were very studious, but yeah, what did you love to do as a kid?
I think I was a very curious kid. One of my first memories, or not even my memories, I think the stories I was told is that I think I was 5 years old and I asked my father how electricity is being produced. And instead of giving me the 5-year-old explanation, which is, the gods of electricity are doing something, he walked me through the entire process from how electricity is being produced, everything around physics and atoms and so on. So I got the full explanation when I was 5.
Oh my goodness. So is your father in engineering? And is that how you kind of got the inspiration to go down that path?
Yeah, so my father was in engineering. Unfortunately, he passed away 10 years back, but he was an engineer. He was very hands-on. I think that was my favorite time is following him around and kind of fixing things. I think my first Barbie dolls were a screwdriver and a hammer, and I just enjoyed that. I enjoy seeing him building things, fixing things, and I was always very curious and I wanted to understand what stands behind it. Building airplane models, Lego kits, everything that someone who's not 5 years old will do, I did.
I love that. And did you find that you had other kids around you who had a similar taste for curiosity and appetite for curiosity, or was it something that you almost were very introverted and kind of independent in your own right in kind of sufficing this taste?
Yeah, so I'm a hardcore introvert. I was born like one. I think I will die as one. But I was very curious. I read a ton of books. I like building things. I like solving puzzles. That was my initial inclination. Kids like to play outside with the ball. I like to play outside and find things that I can explore and kind of go by myself and figure out what the world is doing and what moves the world and ask a bunch of questions. So you can say I was a peculiar kid.
I love it. No, I think that's amazing. And I'm sure we'll get into this, but I'm sure that curiosity has led the way in so many ways to who you are today and the leader you are. And so I'm excited to talk about that. But as I said in the intro, you ultimately went to Technion, which is one of Israel's most, prestigious universities. And I want to know, you chose aerospace engineering. Where did the passion for aerospace come from?
So the passion for aerospace came from different aspects. It started, of course, with my father. He was very passionate about airplane and aerospace. So as I mentioned before, some of the first models I built was for airplanes and helicopters and things like that. So that was the initial one. I think the second one in Israel, schools work slightly different. So when you're 14 years old, you're supposed to start choosing your APs or kind of your path. So the universities comes to your high school and they are kind of sharing their curriculum. What are some of the things that they offer? And immediately I've seen aerospace engineering on that list. And for some reason I said, this is what I'm going to do. And everyone around me thought that, okay, that's interesting. But it was the world of computer science. It was a world of hardware engineering. Folks went to law school, medical school. I've seen aerospace. I said, that's the thing I want to do. And ever since then, I knew that this is going to be what I'm going to study. I don't know how, but it was my path.
Wow. And it seems like you have this sense of also determination, right? Like it seemed like you had your mind on this and nothing was going to stop you. Do you think that's a core trait of yours that you've seen throughout your career?
For sure. I always had a plan. And that plan included 75 steps of all the things I'm going to achieve and by what age I'm going to achieve them. And I was very determined by my plan. But, I'm sure we'll talk later on in terms of how you make a plan and how your life take you into a very different direction that your plan. But when I was 14 years old, I had a plan. And that plan included being an aerospace engineer for the rest of my life.
I absolutely love it. And before we even get into, more of the career, I want to know, was there ever a moment where you looked at, your peers around you and were you a bit of a minority being a girl? I'm guessing, right? But also Israeli culture, maybe there wasn't that discrepancy. But walk me through that and if that ever came into your mind of, do I deserve to be here? Can I do this?
Aerospace engineering tends to be a niche profession anyway, so it was not a large class, but out of, I would say, 60 people in the class, we were 6 girls. But that was something that has been consistent because when I chose STEM was not popular at that time with women, and I find myself many times, and even throughout my career, as kind of an only female in the room, especially someone with a tech background. I kind of got used to that. And I stopped looking into the world of tech through the eyes of a female and a male. And it's more in terms of what I'm trying to achieve and how that serves me.
I love that mentality. And so I want to go into that a little bit because do you feel that now that you've, had this incredible career and you've risen to the top and you've kind of seen it, right? On both ends. And I want to know, do you think that we're a bit flawed in our mentality in even having the discourse of saying, being the only female or how to view it from a male versus female perspective rather than saying like, you know what, I deserve to be here based off of my credentials, and my abilities and my talent. But how do you kind of view that and advice you have for people that may be thinking that?
I was very lucky. I was the oldest out of 2 girls. And I think my family did a really good job in telling us that the sky is the limit. Like they never even thought about giving us guidelines in terms of what we should and shouldn't do. On the contrary, every choice that I've made, I always had a support system around me. And then when I got married, my husband was always pushing me to do more, to achieve my dreams, to be able to do what I want to achieve. And then throughout my career, I found different sponsors that also pushed me to believe in myself. So, but it's also a matter of choice, right? Because you choose your partner for life, you choose your sponsors, you choose where you work and what you do. So I was very conscious not letting anyone in the environment in telling me what I can and cannot do. And even until today, I'm not very good when someone is telling me you cannot do that. If I want to do something, I will find a way to do that. And I think that was part of the curiosity in me and the ability to solve a lot of challenges by myself and kind of pushing me not to lean on anyone else, but trust myself, trust my abilities, and take feedback as a gift, but not as a showstopper.
Okay. And I think one thing I learned just from you talking just now is it seems like there's a very much a healthy balance of choosing who you surround yourself with and making sure those people who you bring into your circle almost don't diminish you and bring you down in any way. But then also there is this element of just having that internal confidence and that internal strength to really guide you and lead the way. So it seems like there's that, you have to strike that balance.
You have to, because if you don't believe in yourself, it doesn't matter how much your environment pushes you. You're not going to be able to feel comfortable in being uncomfortable, because that's part of pushing yourself is you need to get used to the fact that you are never going to be comfortable because you're always trying to achieve more. You're always trying to strive to more. You're always kind of curious in terms of what else I can do. And it's a mindset. It's like, how do you get used to that feeling, not trying to feel that comfortable? And then you're less leaning on someone else to make you feel comfortable because you find that comfort within yourself.
Was there a moment or person in your career that really forced this lesson upon you?
Yes, actually, there is an interesting story. So you mentioned that I had my master's degree in from Tel Aviv University. My plan was to continue to a PhD, and actually, I started studying towards a PhD. And as someone who was an introvert, as someone who thought she will be applied scientist her entire life, and then eventually I I imagine myself going to academia and being a professor. Again, hardcore introvert. What do you want to do? Is not talk to people. Um,
Yes.
and then there was a point in time, and suddenly I got a job offer while still studying and kind of working on my thesis. And that job offer was offering me to lead a team. And I was never a manager before. I was working in the industry in parallel of studying, but I was an individual contributor. So one is like leave your PhD. Second is take a management role. Then third, lead a project that that company had no experience doing before. So it was way outside my comfort zone, way outside, any plan that I had. And I was kind of in a point in time that I need to take a career decisions. Like, am I dropping my dream and going to experiment with something that is completely different? And I kind of put a set of criteria. I gave them a list of demands. Here's the things that I want. And I was 100% certain that they will come back with a no. So I made my life easy and I can continue the path that I chose. But they came with a yes to the list of the things that I asked for. And then you're kind of stuck. It's like, okay, I asked for these things. I never thought that I would get these things. What do I do now? Then the obvious choice is like, well, you asked for, you got what you wanted. Now you need to go and fulfill your commitment. So that's what I've done. And I kind of betted on going back to the industry and building my career in a management trajectory, which I never even dreamed about growing up or anything. It was not related to anything I've done before.
Oh my goodness. So, okay, let's talk about that role, right? Choosing to, like you said, stop your PhD, kind of forgo. Would you say it was a one-way door? Or in your mind, in the back of your mind, were you basically saying, you know what, it's okay, I could go back?
No, it was a one-way door. I knew that if I'm taking that step, I will likely not go back.
If it's relevant, can you share what were those criteria? Was it more specific to the company and the technology, or was it actually something related to just even leadership?
It has threefold. One, I wanted to be able to use my experience and my subject matter expertise to be able to be that subject matter expertise on that project. So I wanted the autonomy to drive what I thought needs to be done without a lot of restrictions. The second part that I wanted is I want to see how these roles, like the first role in kind of building a new career for myself, like how this role is going to help me advance into the future. As I said, I'm someone with plans, so I need to see the plan. And the third one was, and I know it's odd because we don't tend to talk about compensation, but I did ask for a compensation package that suited my giving up an alternative career to choose this one. So I did ask for a compensation package that will suit that one-way door decision. So these were the three axes that I made my decision based on.
It's funny because in that moment, it seems like you were almost making this request and advocating for yourself in a way to say, you know what, the chances of them coming back with a yes is so low that I will feel safe in, staying on this path. And here they came back with a yes. So not only did you advocate for yourself, probably, higher than you even anticipated, but then they also came back with a yes, almost forcing you to say, okay, actually, I got to go and do this. Take me back to that moment of actually joining and going in industry, completely taking the different pathway. How was that experience? What was the biggest challenge in doing that?
I think the biggest challenge was learning how to lead people because I was an individual contributor. I knew how to operate by myself. I knew what it means to push a project through solving problems. But now you're leading a team and you need to figure out how to empower other people because you're not the single hands on keyboard that is doing the work. There is a team around you that needs to do that. And as someone that didn't have any experience in management before, and the teams I worked with before were kind of a team of a lot of individual contributors. Each one of us had our own project, so we didn't even need to work together as a team. So that was a foreign concept for me. It's like, how are you driving that? And as a junior manager, I made a lot of mistakes and I learned from that. And I think every mistake that I made me a better leader in the fullness of time. But it wasn't interesting because you need to learn how to delegate. That's not something we do naturally. You are not naturally a delegator. As human beings, we're naturally an executor. And then suddenly you need to learn how to delegate, how to work through others. And that was a big shift. That was the one-way door.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, you're self-described as the truest of introverts, right? So if anything, it was even more of a slope to kind of climb up and a mountain to climb up, if you will. And so over time, as I even mentioned in the intro, right, you ended up going to Amazon and then Microsoft, becoming the general manager, and then AWS. So clearly you got the tools under your belt to know how to lead, right? And not only lead, teams, but really incredible big companies and big technology companies. And I want to know, as you were learning about how to be a better manager and a better leader, did that come primarily from just doing and making mistakes and learning? Or did it come actually from, did you have mentors? Did you actually outsource, resources to go and learn that actively?
Yeah, yeah, you can never just learn from your mistakes if you want to be a good leader. I said before, I'm a very curious human being. So I read a lot of books. Basically, almost every management role that exists in the industry, I read a book about it. I also was fortunate to tap into some amazing mentors, and I had the chance to learn from great leaders what a great leader really do and don't. If it's learning from my managers throughout the years, if it's learning from friends that I met along the way, but it's a lot about observing and kind of learning from others. And then yes, of course, it's making a lot of mistakes, but it's also learning from your people. It's like you master the art of listening, and what it truly means to be a leader is know how to be a good listener. And as someone, I'm a very opinionated person and said I have a plan, I know what I want to achieve, I have a vision, I know where I want to go. So for me, kind of learning how to become a better listener was the biggest learning opportunity to be able to lead people. It was never around the trust your team to do the things. It's more about creating that openness to have that discussion.
Wow, I can go in a few different directions here. But Inbal, what book? Is there a book that stands out as one that you just think, wow, it really taught you so much in how you manage?
I'll cheat. There are two books. There is one book that I recommend to everyone to read, which is The Alchemist. And for me, that's a book I pick up every few years and I read it because every time I'm reading into that, it just gives you a different perspective where you are in life on how to think about different situations and scenarios. And the other one that I think was, for me, one of the best books that I read was Atomic Habits. Because as someone who always strives for perfection, knowing how to pace yourself and kind of understanding that every day 1% better is going to give you that huge step at the end of the year is also helping you become a better leader because you know you cannot expect 180 transformation from everyone in a day, but it's all about building that gradual changes. So for every leader, that's a book, the first book that jumps into mind in terms of like the change between an individual contributor and a manager is that you need to learn how to control your expectations and what is a true delegation really means and how you don't get disappointed. And for that, it's like adopting that mindset that every day 1% better is the path for greatness. That was a very strong learning moment for me.
As you're talking, you're right. Where, as your manager, you went from a role in which the output was truly coming from your own efforts and your own curiosity and your own research, right? And that's a very different experience than saying, okay, the output now is reliant on so many people's efforts and intelligence and curiosity. And so I'm curious, even now, right, at Twilio as a CPO, how do you evaluate, or at least, how do you determine an a great team member, right? And how much time do you give them to kind of prove their worth and prove their talent before you say, "Oh, you know what? I actually have to," like, maybe they aren't best fit for this team and maybe it's not a fit, rather than saying, "Okay, they need more time and I have to be, patient with it," like you just said. How do you kind of evaluate that?
It's never a point in time that suddenly things are, oh, this is how it's supposed to be. I think the first thing is you need to trust two things. One is your hiring skills, so you know how to bring the right talent for the team. And the second thing is if you inherit a team, which was the case for me, at least in the past decade, is knowing how to assess the talent that can adapt to change, that can ride the wave, and also what are those learnings that you need to do when you are joining a different company with a different culture. It's always a two-way street. So it's not about, okay, do they tick all the boxes and as such they're a great talent. It's more in terms of in the grand makeup of a team, are they serving the role that I need someone to serve and how they do that. are they the best executor that exists in the market, and hence they are awesome on delivering against the roadmap. I can rely on them for predictability. I can rely on them for the hard challenges that have a tight deadline. Are they a big thinker? Are they going to be the one that are going to invent the future? They're not afraid to disrupt ourselves. And I can rely on that specific person or that specific team to kind of help us think bigger. Is it someone who cares more about the day to day, and they're the one that are going to maintain this large platform that Twilio is to be able to build trust with customers? So there is no one single trait that you're saying that's a best team member. It's really about the makeup. And the larger the team is, the more individuals comes together to create that well-oiled machine. So knowing how to look into the individuals and kind of the machine you're trying to build and what each one of the roles and how they're serving towards that. And I think the biggest thing for me is not what is the yes, but what is the no. Do we have people that are slowing the machine? And if they're slowing the machine, why are they slowing the machine? Is it they're stuck in the past, they don't want to evolve, they don't have the specific skill set we need in this point in time to take the company forward? Maybe they're just not easy to work with and they're not great team members. And, software is a team sport. So if they're not part of the team sport, do they have a role here? So it's a different aspect of how you're analyzing it. It's like a chessboard. You need to analyze all the tools you have and figure out how are you best utilizing each one of them.
Absolutely. No, I think that is so, so helpful. And I'm curious, what's your superpower as a leader?
There is an Amazon leadership principle that is talking about write a lot and think big. I think these two are likely together my superpower. One of my former manager told me, you can see the future and it's very annoying because you can see something that no one else can see yet. And I think my growth opportunity with that is like when you see the mountain or when you see the future, when you see something that no one else seeing is how you take other folks with you on the journey. And for me, that's something I'm still honing as my growth opportunity.
What we've learned, right, is that you have the true technical expertise, you have the technical background. And oftentimes, people, whether it's an assumption, whether it's just from experience, that can compromise other leadership abilities, right? Whether it's empathy or, like you said, listening to your team. And even I've talked to a few people you've worked with, and one thing that came up for you is empathy. You understand where people are coming from, what they're thinking based on the situations they're in, much better than other tech leaders. And so I want to know, and my question for you is, was that something that was a very intentional attribute for you to have? Is it natural to you, or do you actually actively try learn that and implement that?
I think for me, it's something that likely comes more natural. You talked about the different changes that I've made throughout my career. And through that, I always am uncomfortable in where I am because I drive myself for change and I drive a lot of changes. I've been all over the tech stack, right? There is no, I would say, there is no piece of software I've not done yet. But that forces you to lean on other folks and kind of embrace that uncomfortable feeling. So I think the one thing I do well is walk in someone else's shoes because I can see what makes them feel uncomfortable being in their place before. And because of that, empathy is something that is natural to me. And I think the other part is because I'm an introvert, I need to create that personal connection with people to feel comfortable with people I work with. So that's another aspect of my leadership is like I want to be able to create different level of connections. And that comes with empathy, because if you cannot be empathetic to someone else you're working with, then you cannot be successful. All of us have good days, bad days, things work. Like sometimes the task we get at work is not something we necessarily want to do. Sometimes the task we get at work is challenging us and we're not feeling comfortable. And then you are not necessarily know how to tell that to your supervisor or how to tell that to your peer or how to talk about it. So being able to have these feelings and kind of be empathetic to someone else that is going through the same challenges I went through and I continue to go through. I think that's something that is just me.
Inbal, what's so interesting that from that answer that you just made me realize is that I think it's such an easy conclusion to make that extroverts, right? Obviously, we've gone into this theme of introverts versus extroverts, which I love. And it seems like the most natural conclusion to make is that extroverts make really compelling leaders, right? They're able to deliver a mission to a team. What you just really highlighted is that I think maybe one of the slippery slopes as an extrovert is that it's so easy to very much be a leader of one to many. But because as an introvert, you're almost forcing yourself, you're most comfortable being one-to-one. And so you have to force those deeper relationships. And by default, you create a much probably stronger connection amongst your team, which obviously has incredible ripple effects.
Yeah, and I think another thing to kind of talk about, because we all start as introvert, extrovert. I think the majority of us eventually become omnivert, because to be able to be a leader, you cannot just be an introvert and be okay with that. I do deliver big messages. I do force myself to go on stage and speak in conferences or do fireside chat or talk in large events or do all hands for my team. This is by far not my comfort zone. And yes, there's a lot of practice that goes beyond what likely an extrovert will go through. But I need to find a balance as the leader I am today to be able to be both. So be extrovert when I need to and be an introvert when I can. So it is about balancing. If you're a hardcore introvert and you're not willing to adopt that curious mindset and being able to step outside your comfort zone and adopt some of that extrovert, I think it's hard to be successful as a leader unless you find that balance. And maybe that was some of the choices I've made when I chose to go to the industry, is also force myself to be a little less introvert than I was before.
Totally. Okay, I want to shift to now. Obviously, like I said, you've joined these incredible companies. You've gone to Microsoft, AWS, and then you made the pivot to a CPO role at GitHub. As you reflect on your career and you think of these big companies that you've joined, what were the key evaluation metrics that you took for considering new career opportunities? And was it, for instance, the role, the, culture at the company? Like, how did you evaluate where you should go and ultimately make that next step?
It had several criterias. I think the first one, I wanted to feel like I am stretching myself. So maybe it's a new tech, maybe it's a new domain, maybe it's a new company, maybe it's a new skill. It had to be something that I feel like I'm learning for me to even pick up the phone and talk to that company when the opportunity comes. I think the second thing in the evaluation process, for me, a manager is always a key criteria. Who is going to be my manager? Because as I explained, like a lot of my ability to continue growing was having the right sponsors in place. And if your manager is not your sponsor, especially as a woman in tech, you're not going to be successful. So betting on your manager is a key criteria for me. And that's something that I spend a lot of time throughout the interview process, kind of assessing, like, is that the right fit? Can I be me? Can I be successful? Am I going to get the right support that I need to? And the company culture also had a similar vibe, because it's also, are you going to be successful in that specific setup? Are there too many limitations? Are there not enough limitation? Is there too much chaos? Is there not enough chaos? Like how much you can be yourself and still be successful within that culture of the company. So these were usually the big drivers. Is like, I need to love the problem I'm solving. I need to appreciate my manager, and I need to feel like the culture is the right culture for me.
And it seems like you're always yearning, even today, right? Even as a CPO of Twilio, you're always yearning for a little bit of that discomfort, a little bit of that discomfort, because if anything, it seems like that's just what forces growth, like what will come of that will inevitably be growth and, some change. What advice would you give to maybe a younger woman who's navigating tech and navigating different career opportunities? I feel like it's so easy to stay comfortable, right? Because what that entails is that you have confidence that you will succeed. And as a woman, you want to have confidence that you will succeed because that bar is high. How do you think about that? And what advice would you give someone who does have that mentality?
The way I think about my career is, I don't think my career was planned. You just heard about 75 ways my career has changed throughout the plan that I had. But I also don't think it just happened. I think a career is a series of a lot of decisions, many, many decisions that you make every day that will eventually impact how successful you are or not. And if you think through that lens, that every decision you make is kind of a step forward in your career, and sometimes it's a step backwards, but then comes the question, how do you learn from that step backwards? And like, what are you taking to your next step? That's the key driver. And if you think about these multiple decisions, so many decisions, you also know that you're never really going to be comfortable because even a decision to stay for a very long time in a job doesn't necessarily means that you're comfortable because the market's changing, the company is changing, your team is changing, everything, the world is changing on a constant basis. So the feel safe is misleading. So the moment you accept that there is no real safe, you only live once, it gives you the push to take risks that maybe you didn't take otherwise if you think that it is safe. The generation of my parents, they used to work for 20, 30 years in the same job. When I decided to leave my first job and go to the other one, I remember like there was a quorum of all the elderly folks, and it's like, why are you changing your job? You have the best job in the market. It's safe, it's secure, you're in a good place, you're getting well paid. Like, why do you want to change? And I'm like, well, that's not enough. Like, I want more. It was not something that resonated at that time, but still I did it because I wanted to do it, and I wanted to drive changes and kind of force myself to do more. So you're never really comfortable if you kind of think about it. There is no comfort. It's change. Now the question is, do you lean in or not?
I love that mentality. I think that's great. So you got the opportunity to join GitHub as a CPO, the Chief Product Officer, right? And naturally, that seems to be that first shift into product, perchance, for you. How were you thinking about that shift and what gravitated you towards that role? What were you most excited about?
Yes and no in terms of product, because when I started my career, I started as an applied scientist, but very quickly I kind of leaned into the role of system engineering. And system engineering is what the aerospace described as product management at that time. I like to think big. I was not someone who enjoyed too much the details, the necessarily hands-on keyboard type of an experience. I like to imagine things, I like to push things. So I started kind of inclining more towards product very early on in my career, but I did grow through the engineering trajectory versus like the pure MBA product trajectory. But I was always looking for roles that had both. I could never just do one. So when I started being a manager of a team, I led a team of multidisciplinary folks. Like I had software engineering, I had product, I had hardware engineers, and then as a general manager, of course, it's a multidisciplinary role because you lead both engineering and product, and you also have your arms into go to market. So when I went to GitHub, it was focusing mainly on product, but I also had all the community aspect, like all the developer engagement. I was also leading big components of the marketing for GitHub. I was leading big part of the strategy of the company. So it was always kind of a mishmash of a lot of other functions that were under my remit. But what I love the most about focusing more on product in GitHub is the ability to kind of spend time in the place that I enjoy best, which is the strategy. I'm a very strategic thinker. I enjoy the what's next, what is the future, how are we reimagining things, how are we reinventing, what will the market look like, how to create a new market. So that's what happened for me in GitHub, and back in Twilio. Now that I lead the entire R&D, it's kind of back to very much similar to the GM capacity that I have both product and engineering, and I'm the end-to-end kind of own the technology for the company, which is the part I enjoy more, which is the strategy, the vision, the execution, the customers, all the aspects of what it truly means being a tech leader.
Absolutely. And you've given me a really good sense of even what it means to be a CPO, right? Because it seems like it really was dependent on the company. Like you wouldn't necessarily gravitate towards a CPO role that wasn't a highly technical company. But here, Twilio and GitHub are both very, very technical, and the software is so core to the company. Let's dive into this, right? Because you kind of gave me a really good segue, which is you even mentioned it before. One of your key superpowers is that you could see the future, right? And right now, we're in such a compelling time with technology. And where does the future go and what does it look like? And so, what I would love to know is two fronts. One is what is actually the future of product and product managers? I think a lot of people, and you actually shared this with me earlier, but I think a lot of people think product is shifting more towards engineering, and there's a little bit of a marriage there happening. But what do you think is actually the future of the product management role? Where does that go?
I think the lines are becoming more and more blurry, right? We lived in a world that you have an engineer, you have a product manager, you have a marketer, you had a sales leader, you had a support leader, and each one of us were kind of marching in our own lanes. And that's the makeup of the company. I think what's happening right now is that the lines are becoming very blurry with all the recent tools and advancements in technology that we're seeing. A lot of that is driven by AI, but also compute is changing. A lot of things are changing, but also people expectations are changing. So if you're analyzing that and you're looking into, okay, everything is changing for us and the traditional way of doing things is no longer serving us, then what's happening to the role of product leader? I think the role of product leader is going to find more tentacles into the business world. And yes, it will venture a little bit more towards the engineering because the product leaders have to be able to speak somewhat tech to the engineering team to be able to communicate better what we're trying to achieve. But I don't see a product manager taking an engineering role because, if I'm thinking about Twilio is one of the largest, if not the largest communication platform that exists today. And today, just let's look into an example, the last Black Friday, Cyber Monday, the ability to send trillions of emails, billions of messages. I don't see a product manager vibe code their way to be able to build a platform in that scale and that capacity, and that platform being able to be successful and kind of futuristic and continue to grow and scale. So you still need a very strong engineering arm to be able to build these capabilities. What I do think that is happening is that you're seeing the ability to have a conversation that is much more tech oriented between a product manager and engineering manager using kind of that, the new tools that we're getting. On the other hand, I'm thinking in terms of how much time we spend today as product managers trying to enable the field to be able to take the market the products, or how much time we're spending and kind of trying to clarify what is the right positioning for the products or how to build brands and all of that. I do think that the product management discipline will start going more and more towards that go-to-market aspect because with the tools, you can create easily an initial pitch to help the marketing team understand better what you're trying to understand, to kind of take the product to the market, or even creating like a quick enablement material to kind of accept the field, like getting the sales team to act faster on these changes and accept the changes. And also, if we're thinking about like the biggest disruption of them all, how much of these workflows are going to be replaced by an AI agent? Like how much people in the loop will be eventually? And then can the product manager influence some of these designs of these AI agents and how they do some of these things? Then I think that the product manager is going to be even more critical and more pivotal. And maybe I'm biased as being a product leader. I'll be the first to acknowledge that. But if you start thinking about the tools as an enabler for a product leader to think bigger, to execute faster, to communicate more clearly, then you're starting to see how the product manager is starting to become a much more foundational element in kind of running a business.
So then, given that, there's a couple thoughts here, but would you say for someone who's, early in their career and in product, right? Or maybe, to be honest with you, maybe even a little later in their career, but there are so many shifts happening. Would you say the best step for them to really set them up for the future would actually be to start gaining some knowledge on the business side and the marketing side?
I think that a product manager today has a high bar. They need to be very curious because they need to understand every aspect of the business, what it means to develop the software, because you cannot assume that software is being done in a dark room by 5 people. You need to understand how team sport is it and the critical of a good product manager in that makeup. You need to understand how a marketing function is working and also how is it being disrupted? Like what are some of the changes that are happening to be able to pivot how you think about building products towards that. You need to understand how your customers are going to change. What is their new requirements? How you anticipate their future needs. And as part of that, you need to understand how the company is selling. And you need to understand the finance behind things because there is much more ROI driven product development in the future. So as a product manager, you have to understand all the components of the company. This is why when someone is asking me, what's the most important skill set for a product manager? I always say system thinking. And it's system thinking not because you need to put your products in boxes, it's because you need to understand all the systems that are involved in in building a product. And it comes across all the functions that exist in the company.
And then that aside now, let's talk about another future other than product managers is obviously you're at Twilio, like you said, one of the biggest communications platform in the world. Like that, in my mind, when you talk about Black Friday, Cyber Monday, like that is just, that capacity is just incredible. But I want to know, how do you think companies will communicate with their customers in the future? What does AI play a role in that future, and how is Twilio thinking about that?
I think it's an interesting point because we're definitely in an inflection point. Even the definition of conversation is not what we imagine it to be, because today when you're thinking conversations, it tends to be between two humans. So the obvious part is what happens when businesses are starting to have AI agents to be that part of the conversation. Even today, when you call a customer service and you're trying to get your issue resolved, many times you are talking to some sort of an AI agent, maybe someone who is more sophisticated, maybe it's a legacy system, but you're talking to an AI entity at the end of the line that is trying to resolve the issue. And then eventually, if this is not successful, after many, many turns, you're handed off to a human being to try and help you resolve your issue. But your initial phase, if it's through chat or through voice or through messaging, it always starts with some sort of an AI entity. So now the conversation definition is different. An engagement definition is different because now you're talking to something that is not a human. You're talking to a representation of something or a workflow. What happens when we start seeing more, and we've seen that recently with OpenClaw, when you start having as a human being, as a person, as an individual person, you start having an AI agent that can start taking actions on your behalf. Maybe they're doing your shopping. Maybe they're talking to your bank. And maybe they're the ones scheduling your appointment with your physician. Now you live in a world that there is a potentially an AI entity that is representing you. So now let's take it one step further. You have an AI that talks to a different AI because you're talking to your AI is talking to a business AI. Is that considered a conversation? What does engagement means in that world? How do you even discover what's happening in that conversation? And then when we're thinking about communication infrastructure, it's even the same. Like, are you still using SMS? Are you still using email? Are you still using voice to have all these engagement? Or does that move to a completely different level of engagement? So I think that's one aspect. The second thing that is happening, we spend years going mobile, right? Apps. Apps was the thing. We have an app to our bank. We have an app to our flights. We have an app for shopping. There is app for everything. But now our devices are starting to be very, very crowded. And I don't necessarily want to install an app for a one-time transaction that I'm maybe buying a flight ticket from a company I don't necessarily fly with, or I'm scheduling to go to a hotel through something I don't necessarily do. And then comes the question, okay, what is the alternatives to apps? So if you're now talking to, there's different AI representations, maybe apps is no longer needed, but there's still needs for some sort of a human connection in that world of that is fully being disrupted, then you're starting to think about communication in a very different level. And that's the future, right? That's what we're heading into. And I think the future is here. It's not even tomorrow. It's all about how are you taking these opportunities to move further. So if I'm talking specifically about Twilio, we live in a world that historically companies thought that they're talking through us through just a single channel, or they're talking to us on the phone, or they send us messaging. It depends into which function you're talking to. Like your marketing will likely send you an email. The sales will send you a text. But to talk to support, you usually are on a chat or you're picking up the phone and you're talking. These entities are completely disrupted. None of them are talking to each other. They don't even treat you as a single customer. So for Twilio, we invented the future of customer memory when we're connecting the dots for all these functions to know that you are who you are. And it's not a phone number is one representation. Your email is a different representation. Maybe in the future, AI agent is a different representation of you, but you're still you and you still have your preference for engagement. Also, the understanding that conversations is now conversational AI and it happens in more than just a single channel. So, conversation naturally, when you're talking to your friend, you're not just calling them, right? You're texting them, maybe you're WhatsApping them, maybe you're sending them an email, but it's still the same conversation with your friend, but it happens on multi channels. So, also bringing that concept that a conversation is multi channel by nature and how you build through that from the get go. And now comes the world of branded, branded calling, branded messaging, rich conversations, rich contextual information you can share, but also building that trust. So if you take that to the next level, now comes the question, do you really even need an app in the future to engage with the business, or is there different ways? So the world is disrupted, and I think Twilio is uniquely positioned to sit in that junction of the the disruption and kind of disrupt the way we used to do things.
Wow. Okay. First, I'm very happy you're at the forefront and leading at Twilio. But two, I have to share purely because so many of the points you said relate so directly to what I'm building. So let me give you a very quick just what I'm building because it relates so directly to what you just talked about. So essentially I'm building a dating company. Okay. It's called Joey. And Joey is an AI matchmaker that talks to you on the phone and through text. So it's not an app. It's literally not an app and it's entirely through the phone, like you said. And there's so much that you can do now to communicate with, your customers in this case. But it's so fascinating to me because everything you just said was exactly kind of the inflection that I really want to and continue to ride on, right? Which is now you can build these relationships, get to know your users so deeply, and then even deliver value entirely through the phone, right? Whereas I think Twilio, even historically, companies are kind of through marketing and talking to their customers. And a lot of that you have to prevent spamming. So now even the concept of spamming is like being flipped on its head a bit because of now you're delivering the value entirely through the phone, if you will. So anyway, it is just so fascinating and it's exciting, I'm sure, to be at the forefront of it too.
Yeah, it sounds like you're on an exciting journey by yourself. It's an interesting one.
Totally. So, okay, Inbal, first of all, this has been so incredible, so insightful. And I'm just so excited for others to hear. And what I love to do and what I'm going to do for you is I ask one question at the end to everyone. Okay. And so my question for you, and I'm really curious actually, given our conversation, but what craft are you spending a lifetime honing?
Patience.
Ooh. In all regards of life, personal, professional?
All regards of life. I tend to move and think in the speed of light. And for me, being able to slow down and be patient, that is a life goal for me to be able to achieve.
And right now, I have to ask, you said your most natural inclination is to plan, right? To continue planning, to write down your plans. Has that shifted given that you've made different trajectories in your career, or do you still embody that mentality?
I think I still am a planner. I just think that my plans are different and the time horizon of my plans are different. I also think that the goals of my life have changed. I have 3 kids, so now I plan their life. Not that they're happy with that, but there is a plan. Not necessarily they're going to live based on my plan, but there is a plan. But, for me, I've been 25 years in tech. Then I'm starting to think about what's next. And some of the things that I kind of pushed myself to start doing is one, being able to contribute beyond being an operator. So for me, it's also sitting on boards and helping other companies being successful, not from a seat of I'm the one who's driving, but I'm the one who's helping companies being successful from a different capacity, or figuring out how to start working better with universities, because I feel like universities are lagging behind with everything that is happening in the market. And they're not necessarily getting the students ready for what is happening now. So students are coming out and they're graduating, they're going to the workplace, they're not ready for what is happening. And can I help also build the next generation of learners? So these are some of the plans that I have. It's just a different type of a plan. But as a planner always stays a planner. It's just that the goals are changing, the time horizon is changing, but there's always a plan.
Exactly. Exactly. I knew that would be it. I love it. So, Inbal, thank you so much. Thank you for coming and sharing your story. I think you've just been so inspirational in so many ways. One, just for also squashing this kind of, theory that being an introvert and how to be an effective introvert and a leader of, a huge tech company and what that looks like. And then also just your leadership traits that you've embodied that I think are so powerful and so many lessons are deeply in that. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much. It was so much fun.